Shalom, miserable humans! So, who's seen the new teaser trailer for Snow White? Well, clearly a lot of people based off the views and the rage thumbnails I've seen on YouTube. Obviously, I've seen it and I'm doing a video about my thoughts on it. Ordinarily, this isn't the type of thing I would make an entire video about. After all, Disney releases live-action remakes all the time, and very few times do they turn out to be any good. So I tend to have nothing new to say when it comes to live-action remakes that many others haven't already said. Besides, I tend to find constantly complaining about the remakes to be just as annoying as the remakes themselves. However, I actually have more to say about the Snow White teaser, and it's mostly positive. Don't get me wrong, I'm still very skeptical and have criticisms, but I still like what I see so far. So without any further delay, let's dive right on in. Let's start with the visuals, because I honestly think this is a visually stunning looking movie. Yes, the visuals are computer generated and don't look entirely real, but I honestly think that works in the film's favor. It looks fantastical and magical, and the fact that it doesn't look 100% real actually enhances that. This looks like an enchanting fantasy world that I would actually want to explore, and considering the fact that I live underwater and I'd have to cast a spell to make myself a bleh human, that's saying something. This world has personality, feels otherworldly, has a memorable look to it, and is visually distinct to that of the animated movie it's based on. Unlike Cinderella, which while visually charming and gorgeous as well, was more grounded in reality apart from the fairy godmother. Snow White, on the other hand, is a full-on fantasy, so it makes sense to make it look like this. It's a world different from the real world that you humans are used to seeing, and there are some things that real landscapes, while beautiful, just can't capture without the use of special effects. The animals don't look 100% real either, but they still look good and charming. Plus, the visuals during the dark and scary forest scene actually look visually interesting, and you can actually see what's going on. It's not dark and dingy. It actually has personality. The kingdom is visually dull, but again, that is absolutely intentional. Yes, it's not that original to have all the colors sucked out of a place that's being oppressed, but it does help make the world outside of this confined space just look even more magical for Snow White to experience. The evil queen's costume looks absolutely gorgeous. This is truly an animated character brought to life flawlessly, at least visually. We'll get to Gal Gadot herself later, but in terms of visuals, it's a home run, even if the quote-unquote actress is severely miscast. I honestly go back and forth over how I feel about Snow White's dress. I like the design itself in theory, but the inexpensive fabrics and oversaturated colors gives it a cheap costume-like appearance, especially that garish yellow skirt. But it honestly looks better in motion than it does in still images and with the vibrant colors of the movie. However, I personally would have made the fabrics more expensive and the colors less tacky. I also would have made the bottom of the bodice have a V shape like in the original. I know I'm contradicting myself, but I would say I like the dress more than I dislike it. Most people seem to hate her hair, but I actually like it. Could it have been better? Yes, but I honestly like the way it looks. But then again, Rachel Zegler could honestly just make it look good. But she needed her bow throughout the whole thing, and she only seems to have it for a short amount of time. But overall, I do love her look as Snow White. I just think it could have been better with better materials. The one thing with the visuals that I think is objectively awful is the dwarves. The designs themselves aren't bad since they look like jolly mythical dwarves that kind of resemble gnomes. However, the issue is that the CGI is absolutely atrocious. They look absolutely awful. If you thought they looked bad in the first still image we got of them, they look even worse in motion, especially Dopey, who honestly looks like Billy from the Polar Express as a dwarf. They look like dated characters from one of those motion captured animated movies. They are clearly CGI'd from head to toe, and it's really noticeable when they're around Snow White. They actually look worse than CGI Genie Jafar from the Aladdin remake, and that's no small quote-unquote accomplishment. I don't know if they use real actors with dwarfism for motion capture or something, but they should have just used real actors and used special effects to enhance their features like they did with the Red Queen in those awful live-action Alice in Wonderland movies. Or better yet, they should have used prosthetics to give them bigger noses, cheeks, and ears to help make it clear that they are mythical dwarves and not just humans with dwarfism. There's a reason a lot of older films look better than films nowadays, and that's because they don't rely heavily on CGI characters, and when they do, they make sure that the CGI actually looks good. The dwarves are going to be amazing major eyesore. I would say in a few years be considered dated, since CGI tends to age poorly, but it already looks horribly dated. You just can't capture the textures of things like skin and human-like characters in CGI without it looking weird. They're so uncanny valley, and this was just a terrible mistake. They look like they were made by AI. Speaking of the dwarves, the only actor that's been revealed is mermazing as Grumpy, and while I'm happy that Grumpy is being played by someone with dwarfism, why haven't the actors for the other dwarves been revealed? I mean, it's not like they are minor characters, these are major characters in this story, so it's odd that they haven't revealed who the actors are. Are they not voiced by little people, and they're trying to hide it because they know they'll rightfully get backlash? I'm willing to bet that they didn't even use motion capture on them, so Dopey doesn't even have an actor due to him being mute, so he's just a CGI puppet. I would hope that none of this is the case, but it's Disney. They aren't exactly the most moral company in the world, and everyone knows it. It's just incredibly bizarre that they haven't revealed the actors for such major characters yet. They're most likely hiding that they aren't played by people with dwarfism apart from Grumpy, and are just using Martin Kleba as what you humans refer to as a scapegoat. However, since the other actors haven't been revealed yet, there's no way of knowing that yet, so maybe I'm wrong, which I would love. However, given Hollywood's history, that's not very likely. Speaking of the cast, I might as well talk about the other major cast members. I haven't really seen Andrew Burnap in anything, so I don't know much about his acting skills, but he's done Broadway, so at least he'll do well with the singing parts. However, all we know about the character of Jonathan is that he's no longer a prince, but rather a leader of thieves, and as a Robin Hood-like character, from what interviews have said, not much to go on, and odd that they changed the character's status. I would have preferred they had him still be a prince and the childhood friend of Snow White that grew into love, so that the true love's kiss would feel more genuine and develop their relationship more. However, who knows if they are even going to do the true love's kiss. Also, I find it a bit odd that they cast someone who is 10 years older than Rachel Zegler. Yes, I know that's common in Hollywood movies, and while it's not that noticeable, he does look more mature than her, and it'll likely affect their chemistry, much like it did with Emma Watson and Dan Stevens in Beauty and the Beast. Although, in that case, there were many more issues with that couple besides the obvious age difference, like the poor writing and awful CGI. Next, the biggest blunder of a casting choice in this movie is Gal Gadot as the evil queen. Yes, she's undeniably gorgeous and looks phenomenal in the role, but the woman can't act her way out of a wet paper bag. Yes, she only has one line in the teaser, but this isn't my first time seeing her act. Her facial expressions are weak, her line delivery is robotic and lifeless, and her body movements that don't involve action scenes are wooden as Tartarus. She seems to be playing the character with more flamboyance, but it comes off more like an amateur stage production by someone who you can't believe actually got the part, like something you'd see in a high school play. There's no way she'll give a good performance at all. She's one of the worst actresses ever. Her acting skills are right up there with Liu Yafei. Not to mention, she's apparently going to sing in this movie, and while what I've heard of her sing in Ralph Breaks the Internet was fine, it wasn't anything to write home about. Her singing is just mediocre to the point where I would rather hear Emma Watson sing autotune and all. They honestly should have either cast Katie McGrath or Lana Parrilla. Tartarus. Lana has already proved that she can play the character flawlessly in Once Upon a Time, is one of the most talented actresses of all time, can actually sing, and is so underrated and deserves to be in more cinematic projects and get the recognition she deserves. But Gal Gadot, she's gonna suck, and if they're gonna have her be the hag as well, I cringe at just imagining how bad her acting will be there. Also unrelated, but is it just me, or does Rachel Zegler look so uncomfortable around Gal Gadot when they're together for promotions? And now we've come to what will undoubtedly be the best part of the movie, and the only reason I'm actually checking out this movie, and that's Rachel Zegler as Snow White. Yes, I know the popular thing nowadays is to hate on Rachel Zegler, but it's honestly unfounded in my opinion, because she's basically just promoting the movie they're making. She had nothing to do with writing the character or the script. I don't want to get too into it, so I'm just gonna recommend this awesome video by ModernGurlz where she defends Rachel Zegler and many other actresses that are criticized and labeled as ungrateful. Anyway, she's clearly a phenomenal singer with a wide vocal range. I hope she'll get to show off her range as a soprano more. I'm so thankful whenever a musical hires someone who can actually sing like Rachel or Halle Bailey as Ariel. She literally has the voice and and looks of an actual Disney princess. Not to mention, she's a great actress who has played similarly naive and wide-eyed characters in the past, like Maria in West Side Story, where she won her first Golden Globe for Best Actress, and that was her first movie role. I was afraid that they were going to direct Rachel to portray the character as tougher, given how they've said she's gonna be a stronger and more active character that wants to be a leader, basically girl bossing, from what I've heard. However, from what I've seen of the teaser and the leaked footage of Whistle While You Work, she actually still feels like the character and is clearly still sweet and caring with a fairy tale essence to her. Her portrayal honestly reminds me of Odette from The Swan Princess, which I'm hoping is the direction they're going for the character. Someone who is strong and spunky, but also exudes a sweet kindness and feels like a fairy tale princess. We'll have to see how the character is portrayed, but Rachel is definitely going to be the best part of the movie. People have been complaining about how they don't think the mirror would actually say that Rachel is more beautiful than Gale, which really is just a bunch of trolls on the internet. It's not hard to see why someone might find Rachel more beautiful. I mean, the two women in terms of looks are pretty much on the same level. They're just gorgeous in different ways, with Gale being more sensual and mature, and Rachel being more innocent and natural. People complaining about this clearly don't have enough to do. Yes, Snow White being more beautiful is a big part of the story, but beauty is very subjective. There are plenty of people I've seen who found the original Evil Queen to be more beautiful than Snow White, because everyone has their own personal preferences. Let's not act like Rachel Zegler isn't absolutely gorgeous. Also, I know people are complaining about a Latina actress playing Snow White. First of all, that shouldn't even matter because white people have enough representation. Secondly, Rachel Zegler is still white. She's only 25% Colombian. Have things really not changed that much since the early 1930s? Latinx isn't even a race, it's an ethnicity. Yeah, she can have a tan at times and is a bit olive skinned, but she's still white. Are you people really telling me that she's just not white enough? Dear sweet Poseidon! Even if she wasn't white, there have been non-white versions of Snow White, such as Kristen Krug, a half-Asian woman and the most beautiful actress to ever play Snow White in Snow White, the fairest of them all. And there was also Happily Ever After, a fairy tale for every child, where Snow White was portrayed as a Native American named White Snow. And in that version, she's not given her name for her skin tone, but because she was born on a day that it snowed. And honestly, I would love one day for there to be a black Snow White with super dark skin and white hair. But either way, this isn't an issue, so join us in the 21st century and quit your Anyway, as for the leaked footage of Whistle While You Work, first of all, I'm not gonna show clips from that because it's no longer available online, and even if it was, I still wouldn't because I don't want to get this video taken down. But I will say, unsurprisingly, Rachel sounds absolutely phenomenal. I do wish she got to show off more of her soprano voice, but she is still full of personality while still not sacrificing the technical quality of her voice. I especially love when she's vocalizing during the song because it's just so heavenly. The choreography of the scene is fine. I mean, there's some cool dancing, but it's also kind of limited due to their small space. I know people have an issue with Snow White telling the dwarves to do the chores and having Happy use the broom instead of telling the animals to do it and using the broom herself. However, I don't really see it as that big an issue because the character is known to be bossy towards the dwarves in the original, since she wouldn't let them have any dinner unless they washed their hands. So I don't really see this as too out of character for her. Plus, we don't know how much of the context of the scene has changed, since the table is now broken and they have to fix it. But that doesn't mean that these grown men shouldn't be cleaning their own house as well. I also don't mind Snow White having Happy use the broom because while it's a bit on the nose, it's not really girl bossing. Plus, I guess she's supposed to be showing her leadership in the scene, and she does do some cleaning as well. My only big issue was Grumpy also singing and dancing along with them when he should be in the corner being all, well, grumpy. It just felt out of character for him to be joining in my opinion. As for the True Love's kiss most likely not being included in the story, I honestly hate that. Yes, I know to modern audiences that's creepy, but sometimes we have to just know that fairy tales run off different rules. While I am in no way encouraging people to do things without consent, fairy tales are more impressionistic and run off emotion rather than logic. In this world, love at first sight is a real thing, and I don't find it creepy that he kissed her because many people give kisses to dead loved ones at funerals as a way to say goodbye. He thought she was dead, and just wanted to say one last farewell to her. Plus, it makes me wonder how Snow White is going to be awoken if it's not by true love's kiss, if they're going that way. And it seems like they are, given the press for the film. I have a bad feeling it's gonna be something cringy, but we'll see. I will also say that I'm predicting that the Evil Queen's transformation into the Hag will likely just be that one shadow trick instead of a proper transformation. That honestly annoys me because of how the transformation was one of the best scenes in the original movie, if not the best. It's reminded me of how in the live-action Mulan, they just skipped over the entire decision scene, which was honestly the best scene in the original movie. I hate when remakes rush through certain scenes. You have more of a runtime, let the audience actually experience these scenes in a way that's just as dramatic but in a new way. And speaking of the Mulan remake, when the teaser was released, it appeared to be a very faithful remake, but as we all know, that wasn't what ended up happening. It was a total mess, and while I do like that they tried to be different from the original, it tossed the essence of the original and of the character of Mulan out of the grotto, which is why it's one of the worst remakes so far. But it's still better than Pinocchio and especially Peter Pan and Wendy. I bring this up because Snow White appears to be a very traditional and straightforward retelling of the original movie, but based off what we know about the movie, it's most likely not gonna be that. It's gonna be very revisionist, and while I don't know how much of this will hurt the movie, it's typically not a good sign. Now, The Jungle Book was a revisionist remake, but it worked because it still kept the essence of the story and added elements from the original book, as well as made it a bit close to the tone of the book. 101 Dalmatians, Cinderella, and The Little Mermaid also made changes to their stories, and many of them were great changes, even if they weren't exactly revisionist. However, it could also turn out like Mulan or Peter Pan and Wendy, which were definitely very revisionist, but also awful. They've even cut some songs from the original movie, like Someday My Prince Will Come and I'm Wishing /One Song. In the case of the former, it is a bit of an outdated song, so I can see why they do that, but they could have had young Snow White sing it when she's unhappy and show how her views have changed over time, but there's also nothing wrong with a woman dreaming of romance. In the case of the latter, it's honestly my favorite song in the original, and I'm very disappointed that it's been taken out. I also want to add that a lot of people are saying that Walt Disney made the original movie to prove that people could watch a full-length animated movie, and that the remake is insulting his hard work. While I do agree that animated movies and shows don't need live-action remakes in order to be legitimate, as they are just a different medium for telling stories, I do understand the appeal. As a little merboy, I often wondered what it would be like for these movies to be brought to life in live action, because I would see these mermazing worlds and wish that they were real. Plus, despite how sick I am of these remakes, I don't think the idea of them is inherently a bad idea. The issue comes in their execution, which tends not to be very good for many reasons, such as casting, the visuals, the writing, the directing, and all sorts of other reasons. I think Disney needs to put more care into these movies so we can be excited about them. If you want more details on this, go check out one of my favorite YouTubers, Tommy Ross, who is honestly very nuanced about these remakes while also pointing out legit criticisms. He even has his own video about the Snow White teaser, so go check out his mermazing content. But to sum it up, these remakes shouldn't be seen as replacements, but rather companion pieces to the original. No one saw the remake to 101 Dalmatians and thought it would replace the original. In the case of a lot of these remakes, they didn't even stand a chance. So while I've rarely been impressed with these movies, they aren't doing harm to animation, especially since in the case of most of them, people tend to forget them. 3D animation, on the other hand, is actually doing major harm to 2D animation and animation in general, but that's a subject for another video. Now, the film hasn't been released yet, and all we have is a teaser, so there's no real way of knowing if the movie will be any good. It has a lot of things going for it, like the visuals, the costumes, the set design, and especially Rachel Zegler as Snow White. However, it also has the horrendous CGI dwarves, Gal Gadot's the Evil Queen, and the press for it that's giving girl boss. Plus, much like Snow White, the live-action Avatar The Last Airbender series had amazing visuals, though some cheap wigs and bad CGI characters, and it turned out to be lackluster as Tartarus. So great visuals can't save a project. Not to mention the many times I've been disappointed by Disney live-action remakes, where there have only been 5 that are actually good, those being 101 Dalmatians, Dalmatians, Cinderella, The Jungle Book, Christopher Robin, and my personal favorite, The Little Mermaid. And in the case of Christopher Robin, it isn't actually a remake to the original movie, but a live-action sequel to the animated movie. Not to mention that 101 Dalmatians was made decades before this live-action remake trend. So when you consider that, there are only 3 live-action remakes to the original movies during this current crash grab that have actually been good. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but very skeptical. I really hope that this movie turns out to be good, especially since it's a remake to a movie that started full-length animated movies to begin with. While none of the recently announced live-action remakes interest me, especially Lilo and Stitch with the whitewashing of Nani, I do actually plan on seeing Snow White in support of Rachel Zegler. Is there a chance I'll be disappointed and the movie won't be good? Yeah, a very good chance. But there's also a chance it'll be good, and at least I'll get a great performance from Rachel Zegler and gorgeous visuals out of the movie. I'm honestly hoping it'll be good, but given the press for the film, I would say there's a strong chance of it not being good. But there's still a chance it'll be good. And those were my thoughts on the teaser to Snow White. So what did you guys think? Do you agree with any of my opinions? What are your thoughts on the teaser? Let me know in the comments. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. You can also check me out on my other social media accounts in the links below. I'm the Wicked Merman from Under the Sea.